what we all want, or what all decent Americans want, is for the Trump administration to do absolutely everything legally in its power to prosecute, not persecute, prosecute and punish every leftist responsible for committing, coordinating, funding, encouraging, inciting this epidemic of political violence. Imagine, if you can, that Kamala Harris had won the last election. In other words, imagine that the same Democrats who ran the Biden administration, the operatives who hunted down the January 6th defendants, who wrote Biden's speeches declaring that MAGA Republicans are the greatest terror threat in the entire country, who launched criminal prosecutions of Donald Trump and his senior advisors, are all still in power. And now imagine that a right-wing radical shoots and kills one of the most influential liberals in the country on camera. And imagine that tens of thousands of other conservatives, just normal people, airline pilots, teachers, politicians, everybody, shamelessly celebrate the assassination and openly call for more of them. And now imagine that in the same week, yet another right-winger shoots up a country club while shouting MAGA, and another right-winger shoots up a news station and leaves behind a manifesto complaining about liberal bias in the media. And then imagine that a Trump supporter plants a bomb underneath one of MSNBC's broadcast vans. And now imagine that a week after all of those attacks, a conservative sniper perched on a rooftop fires into a Planned Parenthood clinic, killing or injuring multiple people. And then imagine that this Planned Parenthood attack was just the latest in a string of them, stretching back several months. Now, in this scenario, is there any doubt how Democrats would respond? Is there any doubt at all that they would wage a full-scale war on conservatives? Have people like me frog marched in front of cameras and handcuffs and leg irons? Is there any doubt that they would declare martial law and label all right-wing expression incitement? Is there any doubt that they would be rounding up conservatives as we speak by the busload and shipping us to Gitmo? Is there any doubt that they would have Fox News and every other conservative media company shut down and its executives arrested or sued into bankruptcy? Now, I asked this question yesterday on social media. It generated a lot of reaction. Will Cain mentioned it on his show on Fox News. But actually, this hypothetical really doesn't go nearly far enough in describing the extent of the left-wing terror campaign that's underway in this country. So let's go through a lengthy, but still not exhaustive summary of some recent attacks by left-wing criminals. And we're going to focus solely on attacks on ICE, leading up to the latest attack, which, of course, happened yesterday. There have been so many of these attacks that they're almost impossible to keep track of. It's a staggering number. So we'll focus on attacks that took place just in the last 4 months. So, guys, this is just the last 4 months and only attacks on ICE. So this is just a small portion of the overall picture. On June 6th in Los Angeles, hundreds of rioters sprayed graffiti on a federal court building and hurled chunks of broken concrete towards officers. Border Patrol officers were pelted with rocks and cement. Per the DOJ's website, more than 1,000 rioters surrounded a DHS branch building, preventing detainees from being processed. And one ICE agent was injured when a rock hit the windshield of his vehicle. One man threw a Molotov cocktail at officers, injuring 3 deputies. Eventually, as we all remember, the National Guard was called in. On June 18th, hundreds of rioters surrounded an ICE office in South Portland, which is, of course, a hotbed of Antifa terrorism. They spent a week targeting the building with bricks, glass bottles, fireworks. They were not forcibly dispersed at any point. It was a rerun of 2020 when they sieged courthouses. In this case, they blocked government vehicles attempting to exit the ICE office. Several rioters assaulted law enforcement, including by shining a laser pointer in an officer's eyes, causing temporary blindness. A day later, a rioter tried to drill plywood doors onto the ICE office to trap the officers inside. And that same day, in a separate attack, an illegal alien threw an ICE agent to the ground, knocked her head into the pavement, and tore off her body armor. A week later, on June 25th, as reported by Andy No, Antifa zip-tied and barricaded the building and attempted to set the place on fire while dozens of agents were inside. And then on July 4th, more than a dozen Antifa terrorists carrying body armor and radios and firearms launched an attack on an ICE detention facility in Alvarado, Texas. They used fireworks as a distraction and opened fire from the woods across the street. One officer was shot in the neck but survived. More than 20 rounds were fired. 3 days later, a gunman shot a police officer in the leg at the entrance of a Border Patrol annex in McAllen, Texas. One Border Patrol officer and one Border Patrol employee were injured as well. Meanwhile, as all this is going on, ICE agents are being doxxed. Their home addresses are being posted on Antifa websites. In one case, trash was dumped on an officer's front lawn. And on July 14th, a congressman named Salud Carbajal joined a mob that attacked immigration authorities as they served a search warrant at a marijuana facility. According to DHS, the lawmaker doxxed an ICE employee who was subsequently attacked by rioters and sent to the emergency room. On July 31st, 2 aliens tried to ram a car into ICE officers in Colorado. On August 2nd, a rioter threw a rock through the window of an ICE office in Washington state. They also set fire to the premises. And then on August 20th, anti-ICE rioters in San Francisco targeted 4 federal agents with pepper spray, slashed the tire of a government vehicle, and threatened to stab a law enforcement official. 5 days later, a suspect made bomb threats against an ICE facility in Dallas. And then 4 days after that, a woman tried to run over a Border Patrol agent who was arresting illegal aliens in Maine. And that brings us to September 12th, when an illegal alien dragged an ICE officer with his car, causing serious injuries. 2 days later, an illegal alien drove his car into an ICE officer before hitting an oncoming car driven by a bystander. Then shortly afterwards, rioters in Broadview, which is in Illinois, threw rocks at police, obstructed vehicles attempting to enter the ICE facility, and launched mortar fireworks at officers. I want you to see how the local ABC affiliate covered this attack, by the way, and the response by ICE. This is important to see. The ABC affiliate goes out of its way to portray ICE as a violent aggressor in this situation, even though they admit that the rioters were committing federal crimes in an attempt to violently interfere with the officers. But this is how these kinds of attacks are covered. Watch.
Things escalated very quickly here tonight when just before 8 o'clock, federal law enforcement agents launched several volleys of tear gas into the crowd of protesters that were gathered outside of the detention facility. Protesters have been here several times already, calling for an end to the immigration enforcement operation now known as Midway Blitz. A cloud of tear gas enveloped the crowd gathered outside Broadview's detention facility tonight. And while a handful of fireworks were launched back in response, most ran from the fumes, some overcome by their toxicity, among them a Southside pastor.
Not just indiscriminate, but they are laughing as they pepper us with rubber bullets, with pepper balls. They are laughing, they are pointing, they are making a game of it, of assaulting citizens who are peacefully gathered to express our views.
Tensions have been building all day. Agents on the detention center's rooftop using what appear to be paintball guns to fire pepper spray pellets at protesters this morning who were attempting to stop vehicles from entering or exiting the facility. Several hours later, another confrontation. A woman blocking the gates, getting shot with the spray-laden pellets close up.
They unloaded on her, hit her in the face. I was trying to block her because she was yelling at them. They didn't like that.
Brian Brannon himself got hit several times and was briefly hospitalized before coming back to rejoin the protest, his shirt discarded after being soaked in pepper spray.
I can go home to my family after this, and the people that are inside there don't.
Yes, the people inside the ICE facility committed federal crimes. That's why they're not free to leave. But he's wrong when he says that they don't get to go home. In fact, the entire purpose of ICE is to send these people home. I mean, that's kind of the reason that the agency exists in the first place. The whole report is a nauseating and very transparent piece of political propaganda, and it's how pretty much every network is covering ICE and the attacks on ICE. They go out of their way to make excuses for the rioters who are surrounding federal buildings and attacking law enforcement. And then when ICE launches tear gas in response, they pretend it's some highly disproportionate use of force. They accuse the officers of laughing, although strangely enough, they never captured that on film, which is weird. They downplay the obvious acts of terrorism that are captured on film and portray the use of non-lethal crowd control munitions as some kind of human rights violation. The lies are as overt as they could possibly be, and the media endorses these lies. They are as anti-American as the Antifa communists themselves. They're doing it because they want to encourage more acts of violence. And they know that their actions are very likely to result in more acts of violence. And that's going to be an important point in a moment. But for now, let's get back to the timeline. Because we're not done yet, by the way. We're not done yet. We just spent 10 minutes listing all the ICE attacks in 4 months, and we're not done. On September 23rd, as reported by Katie Daviscourt, Antifa surrounded a federal building in Eugene, Oregon, in the middle of the day. They pounded on the walls, prevented employees from leaving. And you can see those images on your screen right now. They're clearly trying to intimidate everybody inside the building. This went on for hours. It took several hours for authorities to begin making arrests for some reason. But even then, they didn't haul everyone away in handcuffs. They made targeted arrests, probably because they didn't have the manpower to do anything else, which is not a deterrent. It's not effective. And Antifa knows it. So the attacks have continued. And that brings us to yesterday, which, as we've discussed, a rooftop sniper with a history of communist posts on social media, a left-winger for sure, opened fire on an ICE facility in Dallas in yet another act of left-wing terrorism. He wrote the words anti-ICE on his ammunition. He reportedly hated Donald Trump. There's information was just released by the FBI, in fact, just a few minutes ago, showing that this person was inspired by the Charlie Kirk assassin, was looking up videos of that assassination and was inspired to emulate it. So this is a copycat attack inspired by the other left-wing assassin. But in this case, when the guy opened fire, he apparently missed his targets and ended up hitting illegal aliens instead. So the only people he killed were the detainees. Watch.
Here's what we know now is that police first got calls about this shooting just about 6:30 this morning. This is at the facility just off I-35, also known as Stemmons Freeway, not far from downtown Dallas. When Dallas officers got there, they found 4 people shot, including the shooter. The other 3 people shot were ICE detainees. 1 is confirmed dead. 2 others are critically injured. Earlier, authorities said 2 detainees were killed, but they have since revised that downward. Police say 29-year-old Joshua Yan opened fire, striking an unmarked van at the Immigration Detention Center.
Here's the only photo that we have right now of that suspected shooter. This is a mugshot from 2015 for an unrelated arrest. This arrest was for possession of marijuana out of Collin County. Police say he killed himself before officers arrived today as he was perched on a roof of a nearby building.
The director of the FBI has shared this picture of evidence found at the scene of ammunition with anti-ICE messaging.
So by my count, this is the 4th act of left-wing terrorism in just the past year in which the shooter has written left-wing messaging on the bullets. Luigi Mangione did that. The trans terrorist who shot up the Christian church did it. Charlie Kirk's assassin did that. And now this ICE shooter did it. So we have a very well-established MO. And in these cases and many others, the targets have been vilified by left-wing organizations and social media platforms and the media, which openly encourage precisely this kind of violence. From Congress to your children's schools, there is a culture war raging across America. For the moms watching, I don't have to tell you this, you're living it. I want to make you aware then of Concerned Women for America, the nation's largest public policy Christian women's organization. For 45 years, they've been leading the charge as your voice in all levels of public policy. CWA knows what a woman is. CWA trains women to become grassroots leaders, speak, testify, lobby, and from their Young Women for America's collegiate chapters to moms, professionals, mature women, they're the most influential women's organization in our nation, hands down. The issues they confront are not going away. So this is your chance to step in, speak up, and shape what your daughters will inherit. CWA is here for that moment, and they help women like you turn conviction into clarity and clarity into action. I'm asking you to support their efforts today. For a donation of $20 or more, you'll get a copy of their new book written by CEO and President Penny Nance, A Woman's Guide, 7 Rules for Success in Business and Life. This book's an incredible gift for any young woman graduating or just beginning her professional career. Go to concernedwomen.org/Walsh for your copy today. Again, that's concernedwomen.org/Walsh. And that's not even getting into all the other attacks by left-wing terrorists that don't involve ICE. including the attempted assassination of Brett Kavanaugh, the murder of those 2 embassy staffers, the arson attack in the park in Colorado, and on and on and on. I mean, we could spend the next hour listing all the left-wing attacks in this country in just the past year. We are well past the point where the federal government should take decisive action, must take decisive action, to shut down every single one of these organizations and platforms. Donald Trump has declared Antifa a domestic terrorist group. That's already happened. But so far, the government is not actually treating these left-wing militants as terrorists. So was that a symbolic designation or was it a meaningful one? Was there any practical implication to being designated a terrorist group? You would think there would be. If it was meaningful, then why is Antifa allowed to surround a federal building for even 1 second? How is there not an overwhelming law enforcement response immediately, arresting every single person there? Why isn't every single one of these militants, including that lying pastor, in solitary confinement right now? Why weren't they all arrested and sent to Guantanamo Bay to await trial? And they're terrorists, right? And for that matter, why are websites like Reddit allowed to openly encourage acts of political violence? I mean, pretty much the whole site is like this. This is not legal. You cannot create a platform to host incitement to violence and where people can talk about who they want to kill. That's not legal. That's not free speech. On Reddit, 99% of the content about ICE involves either a flagrant smear about the organization, saying they're kidnapping babies or whatever, or, even more commonly, it's an explicit incitement to violence. So, for example, this is one of the most popular stories on Reddit this week. It's from NBC News. This was the headline, quote, ICE held 5-year-old autistic girl in Massachusetts to pressure father to surrender, family says. So they held the girl, pressuring the father. It's like holding the girl hostage. Well, if you're a moron and you just believe a headline like that, take it at face value, then it sounds pretty bad. But it wasn't remotely true. NBC now admits that. They've changed the headline to read, video shows ICE with 5-year-old girl while agents attempt to arrest her father. And they admit in a correction that they had mischaracterized what ICE was doing. But of course, they knew what they were doing. They knew that the illegal alien who had prior arrests for domestic abuse and strangulation had abandoned his own child in his car. They knew that ICE, far from holding the child hostage, was saving the child. But they reported it a lie anyway. Why did they do that? Because of this. Because they want exactly what I just laid out. Because they want more violence. That is the point. That is why they're doing it. And it would cause more left-wing terrorists on Reddit to demand more violence, which they did. So here's just a sampling of what I'm talking about. An account on X collected many of these. And each one of these sentences is a separate post on Reddit. Okay, so these are multiple people, and we're just going to go through the quotes. This is what they're saying. People need to start blasting. Shoot first, ask later. Those are kidnappers. Take them out. They pushed us to the point of violence. Those agents should be handcuffed behind their backs and given a 10-second head start. They've made the first shot. Now it's time to return the favor. Let's escalate. Smoke the mother effers. They shot first. Now it's open season on ICE. Now again, those are all separate comments. They're all highly upvoted, meaning they're popular with the community. This is not legitimate or legal political discourse. You're actually not allowed to do this. This is against the law. You can go to prison. You should go to prison for going on the internet and saying, yeah, we need to start killing these federal agents. None of these people are advancing a political opinion. These are actual direct threats of violence that qualify as incitement under the law. In this country, the freedom of speech does not include the right to call for violence with the intent of causing imminent violence if that statement is indeed likely to cause imminent violence. That's where the line is. It's a very clear line. And as we've seen very clearly, leftists have crossed that line repeatedly. Reddit will ban virtually all conservative speech, no matter how tame it is. But they'll tolerate criminal activity like this. That needs to end. Reddit should not be allowed to allow this kind of speech. Okay, there's all of the pretense that you need legally to start making arrests. Start making arrests of the users and of the people running the platform. And yet it's not happening. Federal funding for most universities, including Georgetown, should come to an end. This is an actual sign that's currently hanging outside several dorms at Georgetown. It reads, "Hey, fascists, catch, the only political group that celebrates when Nazis die." So they're quoting the message that Charlie Kirk's murderer used on his bullet. And they're directing students to join something called the John Brown Gun Club, which is a communist group that's popular with Antifa. If you follow the QR code on that flyer, here's what you'll see. It takes you to a website that reads, quote, "We're building a community that's done with ceremonial resistance and strongly worded letters. If you want to make a real change in your community, let us know below." Again, this is not legal. Everybody involved should be in prison. Why are they not currently in prison? They are openly recruiting assassins on the campus of a major American university, one that receives hundreds of millions of dollars in federal funding. This is incitement. Everybody involved in producing that flyer, everybody in the organization, everyone at Georgetown that allowed this to happen should all be arrested. It's not legal in this country to post a flyer that reads, "Now hiring people who want to kill Republicans." And that's effectively what this sign is. I mean, not effectively, that's what the sign is. A threat of violence doesn't literally have to be, "We're going to kill you." If you send a conservative a note with a quote from Charlie Kirk's assassin and you tell them that, the time for debate is over and that you're joining a socialist gun club, that's a threat. Obviously. It's a threat to every conservative at Georgetown, and the FBI needs to act accordingly. But as of now, that's not happening. Georgetown didn't even take the flyer down. Why would they? Their administration presumably endorses political violence too. They certainly endorse it. So does the National Democrat Party. This is not hyperbole. Nearly everyone who runs the National Democrat Party is perfectly fine with ICE officers being shot and killed. Like all of them are. The entire administration of Georgetown, we're perfectly fine with it. They'd love to see it happen. That's what we're dealing with. These are not just people on Reddit. These are people running these organizations. They want this to happen. They are bloodthirsty maniacs, and they want people to die. Just the other day, Gavin Newsom declared that ICE is authoritarian and that the Trump administration is an illegitimate government that's going to suspend elections in the country. Democrats want more national violence, just as we saw in 2020, and they're getting it. If we want to have a First Amendment for much longer, there needs to be a full-scale crackdown on left-wing radicals before this terror campaign progresses any further. If the FBI could round up grandmothers in Alaska who walked around the Capitol building on January 6th, if they could concoct a fake sting operation to catch random hobos who supposedly wanted to kidnap Gretchen Whitmer, then they can certainly find every single one of these people posting these death threats and flyers, every single one of them, and arrest them all. Executive orders are not going to be enough. These people, the left-wing terrorists, have declared war on the United States. Well, the United States should declare war on them. Every militant who commits, facilitates, funds, coordinates, or incites political violence must be treated exactly as we would treat any American who did any of that for ISIS or Al-Qaeda. They are contributing material support to a terrorist enterprise. They are providing aid and comfort to the enemy. And they should be treated accordingly. Exactly as we would treat anyone who affiliated themselves with Al-Qaeda is precisely what we should do with these people. And yes, I'm well aware that the word incitement gets tossed around a lot to justify unconstitutional crackdowns on speech all the time. Most of the time when speech is labeled incitement these days, it's bogus. I've been accused of incitement for stating basic facts about biology. I've been accused of stochastic terrorism for saying that, a hospital is chemically castrating children when in fact that is what they were doing. But incitement is a real thing. Even though it's misused, the term, it is a real thing. The fact that the left has misused the term endlessly and maliciously does not neutralize the concept of incitement, and it doesn't mean we can't prosecute it. There is a legal precedent on this. There are laws on the books. We should use them. When you go around claiming that ICE agents are Gestapo, that they're kidnapping innocent autistic children, that it's time to start blasting, you're openly inviting and encouraging violence. When you call your opponents Nazis, when you casually accuse them of genocide, when you accuse them of trying to bring back Jim Crow or slavery, you are inviting and encouraging genocide. When you celebrate and justify assassinations and then provide a list of people who should be hit next, as they did with Charlie and the healthcare executive, you are inviting and encouraging violence. When you post a flyer on a college campus telling people to join your militant firearms organization because debate doesn't work anymore, and you cite the words of a political assassin, you are inviting and encouraging violence. Now, some of the examples I just gave probably don't cross the line into legal incitement. Calling your opponent a Nazi, saying that person's a Nazi falsely, it is effectively incitement. I mean, you are saying that because you want that person to be killed. That's what you're doing. Now, something like that you probably can't prosecute, but a lot of those examples can be prosecuted. Legal incitement. And all of those things are intended to lay the groundwork for violence. They should all be loudly condemned, and whatever qualifies as legal incitement, which is a lot of it, should be prosecuted as such. Now, to be clear, I'm not even advocating for Republicans to do everything that Democrats would do if the roles were reversed. Yes, they would haul every Republican directly into a gulag if they had the opportunity, whether or not they made any threats. If anything like this was happening on the right, anything like it, where you had this epidemic of right-wing political violence coupled with hundreds of thousands of conservatives openly calling for more violence, if anything like that was happening and Democrats had power, it would just be over. Like, you would not be allowed to be a conservative in this country anymore. They would throw the rules out. They would chuck the Constitution into a wood chipper. And they would ruthlessly persecute every single one of us if conservatives engaged in the kind of systematic campaign of political terrorism that the left is currently conducting. But that doesn't mean that we should do the same. I believe in the rule of law. Even though they would mercilessly persecute all of us if this was happening on the right, I don't want to see anybody persecuted. What I do want, and what we all want, or what all decent Americans want, is for the Trump administration to do absolutely everything legally in its power to prosecute, not persecute, prosecute and punish every leftist responsible for committing, coordinating, funding, encouraging, inciting this epidemic of political violence. I want them to actually treat Antifa like the terrorist organization that it is, and handle its adherents and affiliates the same way we handle ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Don't shy away from prosecuting terrorists and criminals who are obviously inciting and committing violence. Now is the time. I mean, at this rate, we can't go 2 days without another left-wing terrorist attack. At this point, it is not a question of whether or not there will be another left-wing terrorist attack, whether or not there will be another high-profile conservative shot and killed. It's not a question of whether this will happen. It's only a question of when it will happen. And my bet is that all that stuff's going to happen again very soon. This is unsustainable by any metric. Lives hang in the balance. We must act. Crush the terrorists. Do it now. There is no more time to waste. If you'd like to see what else I have to say, you can access my full show by going to dailywire.com or by going to the Matt Walsh Show Twitter page. Hope to see you there. Godspeed.